living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Can we eat our way to strong bones and healthy joints? While bone health is an important part of healthy aging, we don't always take the steps we should to protect our bones. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Today we are talking about bone-building foods and foods that may even help with joint pain. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. We're joined first this morning with Dr. Jeff Dixon, who is an orthopedic surgeon, to talk to us about bone health this morning. And thanks so much for being here with us, Dr. Dixon.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So let's start out by talking about the importance of bone health, especially as we age. Can you talk about how our bone health kind of changes over time?
Yeah. So I think in broad terms, the two most common things that people are going to see as they get older are osteoporosis. That's sometimes called the silent thief. In general, you don't notice it until it becomes a problem. And so that's why it's kind of a scary one. And the other one is much more in your face. It's osteoarthritis. And we've all, know someone or have experienced the problems with achy joints, knees, hips, shoulders, fingers. So it can kind of happen anywhere. And I think those are the two most common things people are going to see as they get older.
And how likely are we to deal with bone health issues? Is it inevitable, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's probably inevitable. Almost 100% of people, to some degree, are going to have to experience some sort of joint, osteoarthritic pain. And then everybody loses bone mass as we get older. Whether or not that becomes symptomatic or becomes problematic is another question. But just some general stats. It's predicted that, in 2025, there'd be over 2 million joint replacements done. And that's for end-stage arthritis, meaning you've gotten to the point where you can't function without doing something drastic like a joint replacement. And then worse than that, there's over 300,000 hip fractures a year. And that's just hip fractures. It does include, all the other wrist and ankles and things like that we see. But hip fractures are especially problematic. Healing potential's low. Only about 0.25% of people get back to their pre-injury state. And the mortality rate is 20 to 30% in that first year. And so it's devastating for individuals and for families for something that's somewhat preventable and or treatable.
So you talked about joint replacements there. How is our bone health related to our joint health? What's going on in our bodies with that?
So the interesting thing is, and they've studied this quite a bit, is they're inversely related. And so as, people who have osteoporosis tend not to have as much osteoarthritis and vice versa. Good news is treating your osteoporosis does not increase your chance of getting osteoarthritis. And so don't think you have to pick one or the other. And then it also makes a big difference down the road. If you need surgery to replace a joint or fix a fracture, having weak bone it makes it a lot more difficult and a lot higher chance of having a complication. Just having weak bone, of the implants not working or failing. And so always better to take care of the osteoporosis. Don't let that inverse relationship fool you, but just kind of an interesting thing that we notice.
It is. And so you already talked about some of the common health conditions that people see as they get older. First, can those conditions be prevented at all? I know you said it's a little bit inevitable. And two, once people start seeing some of that damage or that not as healthy bones as they would like, can that be reversed?
Yes and no. For the osteoporosis, it's absolutely treatable and preventable. And so our bones, as we're young, is when we build bones up into our mid-20s and 30s. And impact activities, so running, jogging, weightlifting, things like that stress our bones react to that and put down more bone. And so those are our formative years. We continue making bone during that time. And then after that, we kind of either level off or start losing it. And so especially important in women after menopause. There's a few years after that where bone loss is accelerated and then quickly and continues to decline. Men in general also decline slowly, but it's preventable by just maintaining healthy eating habits, active lifestyle, and then when necessary, getting checked and getting supplements or drugs as needed to take care of it. The flip side to that is osteoarthritis is not preventable. Being active actually helps with cartilage health. And so they did a study, and marathon runners had about twice the thickness of cartilage as the general population. And so the old thought that you can run your cartilage away is kind of debunked. So staying active is great for that. But if you got it, it's there, it's not going away, and it doesn't tend to get better. And so if that's a problem, we manage it symptomatically, make sure you're comfortable so you can maintain your active lifestyle. And then, joint replacement, unfortunately, is the only fix for that problem.
Okay, great. That's great information. And so we're going to talk here in just a little bit with a nutritionist about some of the nutrients that we need. I just wanted to ask your opinion on what you think about supplements and whether people should consider getting any of the nutrients that we need for strong bones from supplementary or dietary pills.
Absolutely, in the right setting. In general, calcium and vitamin D are the main players when it comes to bone health. And so, vitamin D helps us absorb the calcium. The calcium is what actually, goes into the bones to make them strong. But shotgunning the general population has not been productive, and it's, not cost effective to do that. And can be dangerous if we get too much of them. And so as a general rule, if you're in a time frame when you need increased levels after a fracture or healing from a bone injury, or if you've been tested and found to have low levels, I think that's when supplements come into play. But just as a general rule, I don't recommend people just start taking them without a reason to do it.
Okay, perfect. That's good advice. Thanks very much, Dr. Dixon. We're actually out of time, but we appreciate your expertise this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And when we come back after this, we are going to be talking about a nutritionist, about some foods that might help us build bones and some foods that might take our bone strength away. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. We're joined now with Jamie Larice, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist, and she's been on the show before, and we appreciate you coming back, Jamie. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about nutrients that build strong bones. I think most people know calcium is a big one. They hear calcium all the time. So we'll start talking about that one. Does it matter if you drink non-fat, whole fat, low-fat dairy, milk to get the calcium that we need for our strong bones?
Yeah, that's a good question. Calcium is a mineral that is available in a lot of varieties of foods, but most available in dairy foods. So when you're choosing regular fat, low fat, or non-fat products, you're not choosing low calcium. The only nutrient that you're actually getting rid of is the fat, but it's really important for people to be very careful about those dairy products that they're deciding to go lower fat and identifying and looking at the ingredient list to make sure that it's not loaded with synthetics. Fat-free half and half is an example, is going to be important because inflammation is important for bone health.
Gotcha. Okay. And what about those folks who try to avoid dairy or don't handle dairy well? Maybe they're lactose intolerant. Where are their options for calcium?
Right. So there, we are one of the countries that drinks dairy a lot. Around the world, a lot of other people don't drink dairy and are able to still get enough calcium. Green leafy vegetables has a lot of calcium. Fish, when you eat fish and you're eating the bones, that you don't realize that has a lot of calcium. Almonds, dried figs, sesame seeds, and sesame paste like tahini has enough calcium. Although dairy has the largest source of calcium, there are easy ways to get it if you don't do dairy.
Okay, great. And then what about milk alternatives like almond milk, soy milk? Do those have calcium in them?
Most of those have very minimal trace amounts, just soy and almond. So those particular products are usually fortified with calcium, much like you can get orange juice which naturally doesn't have calcium, but you can get calcium fortified orange juice. It's not the same. The body prefers it from food, but if someone is deficient and they're not getting calcium from other sources, those alternatives can be a choice.
Okay, one more question about calcium. How much do we need?
Well, the dietary guidelines for Americans has just come out, and so when we think about calcium, it's really important to not just target the number, because most people will just go out and get supplementation. As we age, our calcium needs are going to be different. So when someone is born, up until they're 20, is 90% of your bone mass is going to be developed. So it's really important for people under the age of 20, from birth until 20, to get calcium, which is why we were told to drink milk. Between the ages of 20 and 50, it's going to stabilize. And then after 50, generally the absorption of calcium decreases, and so then it's about maintaining the bone health that you need. But if you were to look at dairy products and look at the label, they actually have a percentage on every label per serving size that says this particular product gives you X percent of your daily amount. So if you look on milk and you see 20% per 1 cup, you know that you're getting 1/5 of your daily value of calcium that you need for the day.
Okay, perfect. That's a good way to check. And so I know other nutrients are also important to our bone health. So let's talk about vitamin D, because I understand calcium and vitamin D kind of go hand in hand. So how do we get our vitamin D?
So it's difficult to get vitamin D from food. It's not impossible, and this is where supplementation can be really important. Good quality supplements are not equal across the board. Vitamin D is one that we have a lot of research on, because vitamin D acts like a fat-soluble vitamin, but it's actually a hormone. So for people who think that they're deficient in vitamin D, the first thing is to visit their primary care provider and get a vitamin D test. And then supplementation is always recommended, especially for people living in Montana, because the sun actually doesn't even reach its peak for us to be able to absorb and convert vitamin D, and we're spending a lot of time indoors.
Mm-hmm. And something Dr. Dixon talked about too was with women and their ability to get calcium and vitamin D, especially after menopause. He touched on that briefly. Can you talk a little bit more about why it's important for women who have gone through menopause to pay attention to calcium and vitamin D for their bones?
Sure. Again, it really is about making sure that we are preventing bone loss as we age by having nourishing diets and practicing good lifestyle habits. But estrogen, which is a hormone that decreases when older women go through menopause, is a hormone that's directly related to bone health. And so when folks go through menopause, it's really important that they are getting enough calcium within their diets to maintain their bones at the time. Remember, at 50 years of age, the absorption of calcium is going to decrease. So you could be loading yourself with supplements. It can be swimming around in your blood, but it's not able to actually get to the cells. So women over 50 who've gone through menopause, it's really important to have nourishing diets that have calcium, rich foods in it, but also maintaining lifestyle habits that are anti-inflammatory.
Okay, perfect. And I know vitamin C is also important to bone health after menopause and just in general. Where do we get vitamin C from?
Yeah, easy. Vitamin C is one of the most powerful antioxidants in the world, and fruits and vegetables. Vitamin C is extremely abundant in fresh and frozen vegetables, and if you can eat those, should eat those every day, more than one time a day, you are going to be getting enough vitamin C, not only for bone health, but just your overall general health.
Great. And we're almost out of time, but really quickly, how much vitamin C do we need? And is there a concern about getting too much vitamin C?
Generally, we need about 60 milligrams per day, but again, focusing on that number isn't really quite important because vitamin C is also one of the most heat-labile vitamins. So when you take it in supplement form, it's been heated, it's been pressed. By the time it gets to your body, it's not all that viable. With supplementation, like you get in the hospital for infections, over 2,000 milligrams per day is going to cause some very severe digestive issues.
Okay, great. That's perfect, Jamie. We do have to pause here for a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to keep talking about bone-building foods, and we're going to focus on joint health as well. So stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. We're still talking with Jamie Larice, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist, and she's going to continue talking with us about some nutrients and some foods that we can be doing or eating so that we can make sure that our bones stay as strong as possible. So thanks for sticking around with us. So we touched on vitamin C, we touched on vitamin D. What about vitamin K?
So vitamin K is not as well known. It is a fat-soluble vitamin. Again, all of these nutrients work together symbiotically, so it's not about grabbing calcium supplements or vitamin C supplements or vitamin K supplements. Real wholesome food is going to have the gamut. Vitamin K is really important because when you don't have good levels of vitamin K in your body, it does lead to osteoporosis risk. It can lead to fall fracture risk, and it can lead to cardiovascular disease. So we want to make sure that we're well nourished. And vitamin K you can get easily with green leafy vegetables. You'll hear me say that a lot. Green leafy vegetables have a lot of calcium, they have a lot of potassium, and they have a lot of vitamin K. Other food sources include fish, meat, eggs, among others. So if you have an eating pattern that includes real wholesome foods from the 5 food groups, especially fruits and vegetables like green leafy vegetables, you won't be at risk for deficiencies, and thus you're supporting bone health.
Okay, great. And let's talk about protein too, because I understand our bones are actually about half of protein. So do we need to be careful about where we get our protein?
In my opinion, we are not at risk of not getting enough protein, especially living here in America. But the sources where we're getting our protein tend to be a lot of synthetics that we're getting in powders, we're getting in bars, and we consume a lot of protein. But again, when I talk about absorption of nutrients, there's only so much we can absorb at a time. And so as we age and we lose muscle mass, getting good quality sources of both meat and non-meat sources of protein rather than the synthetic protein powders, synthetic protein bars is going to be really important, because bone is actually a living tissue. It's consistently breaking, it's building, and so much like the rest of our organs and our brains and everything in our bodies, we need to nourish it with the 6 essential nutrients, and one of those is protein.
Okay, perfect. And then one more nutrient to touch on is magnesium, which is maybe another one that people don't know as well. Where is magnesium? Magnesium
is in real foods. So remember that when we think about nutrients that are found in foods, they are designated in food groups because they tend to have the same nutrient profiles. All dairy products tend to have the same nutrient profiles. Magnesium supplementation is super popular, usually for sleep, right? But if you're doing it dietary wise, you have to be very careful, because over supplementation can cause very severe digestive issues, and the body likes magnesium to come in that packaged form with everything else. So when you think about magnesium, again, green leafy vegetables, beans, nuts. These are things that if you eat as part of a daily eating pattern, you're going to be fine and getting enough of these nutrients. Okay, well, let's flip this coin and talk about food that might be sapping our bone health. And let's start with salt. How can salt affect our bones? So salt on its own is not problematic. It's when we have too much sodium in our diet. And when we're eating a wholesome diet and preparing our own foods, as long as we're not dumping teaspoons and teaspoons of salt on our food, it's not a problem. But because of our modern society, we are eating so many more foods that are prepared outside of the home. Salt is not only for flavor, but it's also for shelf stability, how food stays fresh and palatable. When we have too much sodium in the diet, we are affecting our blood pressure and we're affecting our kidneys. When we affect both our blood pressure and our kidneys, that's going to pull calcium from the blood, because calcium is used almost like a spark plug, if you will. So the more it has to deal with problems that we are causing by our diet, the more calcium is being leached from our bones. Okay, so are there food products that we should be limiting or avoiding because of that salt issue? Now, all food, right, whether it's real food or food product, can fit within an eating pattern. But unfortunately, when we have too much food product, which has too many synthetics, too much salt, too much added sugar, and too much supplementation, right, foods that are enriched with nutrients, it can cause inflammation in our body. When we have inflammation in our body that doesn't go away, that becomes chronic. When it becomes chronic, the body is not able to do things like build bone. So it really is about a pattern of eating that is mostly real wholesome foods from the 5 food groups, and then of course sprinkle in your party time with food product, but food product is not giving you any nourishment.
Okay. And then another one I've heard is carbonation, and that carbonated drinks can hurt your bones. Can you speak to that? Is that true?
Sure. It's not the carbonation. It's really specified towards colas. The dark brown colas, they have phosphoric acid in them as a main ingredient. Now, phosphorus is a mineral that's important for bones that we get from food. It's located in dairy products. But when you have a derivative of phosphoric acid, that's the main ingredient in soda, what that does is overconsumption will leach calcium from your bones.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about inflammation and joint health and foods that might actually help us reduce inflammation. Is that possible?
Oh, yeah. So the anti-inflammatory diet, which definitely is a buzzword, really is just about utilizing food as medicine. So when you think about reducing the amount of inflammation that causes conditions, the gamut, including joint conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis, it really is about using food as medicine. Wholesome foods that are made from real ingredients that are closest to the source. Fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables, whole grains, quality dairy products where there's no synthetics because they took the fat out, meat and non-meat sources. By having a variety of those foods in an eating pattern, you will be giving your body the medicine it needs to quiet the inflammation, and you're just going to feel well.
Okay, great. We're almost out of time, Jamie. Any final words of advice?
Really think about the body as a system. Everything is working together. So pinpointing certain nutrients for health is important for knowledge, but really thinking about an overall pattern of nourishment and really utilizing food first as medicine is going to be the best way to keep your bones healthy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. As always, awesome information. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank Dr. Dixon again for being on our show today. And thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you'll come back and see us again next week. Until then, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. We'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health in partnership with AARP Montana. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the Healthy Living for Life logo. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.